G'day guys, Joel, my Big J here, and welcome to another edition of Aussie Boxing Talk. So just reviewing the George Kambosos Richardson Hitchens IBF 140-pound title fight that happened earlier today. Unfortunately, pretty much bar probably the first round, George was completely outclassed by Richardson Hitchens, the much bigger, younger, stronger man. And George succumbed to an eighth round knockout via a body shot in very similar fashion to how Lomachenko knocked him out last year in May back in Perth. So where does George go from here? The only plausible thing is to retire, unfortunately. I don't think George has got it in him anymore. And some people are questioning whether George ever had it in him in the first place. I do. I think that the gods were smiling on him the day of the Teofimo fight. People call George, he's an overachiever. He's a one-hit wonder. It was a fluke over Teo. And to all those people, I say, well, that's bullshit because he won. Yeah, okay. To be honest, if Teo was fully focused, he probably would have knocked George out in 6 rounds, but he didn't. So, I don't think people should necessarily, there's a lot of tall poppy syndrome in Australia, and people who don't know what that is. When someone's up on a pedestal, we like to knock them down a few runs and be like, well, mate, you're really not that special. And Australians pride themselves on that. So it's really a thing that I really think George should retire because I don't see where he goes from here. I mean, unless he wants to end up like the former champions that he beat. He beat Mickey Bay when pretty much Mickey Bay was 2 seconds away from retirement. He beat Lee Selby, who was a blown-up, washed-up featherweight. So unless George wants to become that himself, I think he needs to retire. And people are praising Richardson Hitchens, saying it's his most dominating performance. Of course it was. Richardson Hitchens beat a blown-up, washed-up lightweight. I mean, George doesn't seem to have it anymore. And as a blown-up lightweight, and a small lightweight at that. So for everyone out there running saying, oh, Hitchenson's, dominated George. Well, remember, George is a blown-up lightweight himself. So I wouldn't go saying, that Richardson Hitchens deserves any real praise for his victory because George was a blown-up lightweight. And a small lightweight at that, which makes it an even smaller 140. I mean, Hitchens, you saw the size difference. It was huge. So Liam Paro took Hitchenson's the distance. And George got knocked out in the 8th round, but then again, George was coming off a 11th round knockout via Lomachenko. So unless George wants to be a gatekeeper and cannon fodder for the young fellas, similar to what he did against Lee Selby and Mickey Bay, I really think it's time for George to give it away. I mean, because where's he go from now? He's never going to be main event status again unless, if he goes back down to 135, people like Shakur Stevenson and all that can use him as an easy voluntary. But how does that make money? These guys won't come out to Australia. So, I mean, the only thing is now is that fighting an Australian for a world title, unless the champion's a huge name, the only way they're going to make money is come out to Australia. So, and a lot of international fighters won't do that since what happened to Pacquiao in Australia. Everyone thought that Pacquiao got robbed. So, for world title fights, unless you're Devin Haney did it, but he was giving George back the rematch. Lomachenko wasn't the champion. It was a vacant belt. So. But yeah, it's disappointing for George. But I think, as I said on T Street's video earlier in the day, now that he's 32, he just turned 32 yesterday, so happy birthday, George. Is that he's 32, he's healthy, he's wealthy. He's got his family to consider. How much do you keep risking your health, which will affect your wealth? Because if you don't have your health, people, you don't have anything. It's as simple as that. it's as simple as that. You go, well, how many more hits in the head is it going to take for him to say, well, enough's enough? So it's probably a good idea to give it away while he's still relatively young. Jeff Horn gave it away at 32, even though he officially didn't retire at 35. He didn't fight for 3 years. So Barry Michael gave it away at 32. There's nothing wrong with walking away now. He's had a hell of a career. I mean, he's had the biggest fights in Australia since Jeff Horn. He's had 2 undisputed world title fights. He got Lomachenko here, right? He's got an excellent international record. He's only lost once overseas. He's fought, 3 of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in the world, and Devin Haney and George Teofimo Lopez and Vasily Lomachenko. What is there really left for him to prove? That he can still be a slower, weaker-moving punching bag for these young blokes just to get his name on their resume? No, there's no honor, there's no honorability, there's no honor in doing that. There's no honor in being someone else's punching bag. And it'll just get to the point where he's just fighting too many fights. He's lost too many fights, and people are just screaming at him, "Please, George, retire." And I think that's the way to go. I think he's better off bailing out now while he was on top. He's had his last world title fight. He'll probably never get another one. His last 6 fights, Teo, the 2 Devons, his 5 out of his last 6 fights have been for world titles. So you can be solace with that. And I think it's really time to just say, yep, George, you've done well. You've had a hell of a career. You've been in the biggest fights in Australian boxing, some of the biggest fights, the second biggest fight crowd-wise in Australian boxing history. You're the only Australian to ever fight for undisputed in Australia. I don't know if Lionel Rose ever defended in his titles in Australia. I'd have to look that up. But certainly he's the only Australian that I can think of to fight in Australia for undisputed. Obviously, if people say Kostya's a born and bred Russian, so I don't count Kostya. Same with Viktor Chinin, he's Armenian. But, he's had a hell of a career. He's had some massive fights. He's made a lot of money. If I was in his position, what I wouldn't give to be in his position, I would just be like, bugger this. There's no point. I mean, he wants to go and train. I saw in the post-fight interview that he wants to go and train his son's footy team. Well, go and train your son's footy team, mate. You've got the money to do it. If he's invested his money wisely and he's bought some real estate, you can retire on that. And good luck to him. Better than getting your head kicked in for the rest of your life. So, on the undercard, Tiramori knocked out old mate. Well, it looked like they dragged him out of I don't know where they found that guy. So they just said, righto, mate, jump in the ring, and of course knocked him out in less than 1 round. Looked too good. I think he looked, even though he was 265, I think he looked too skinny. I think he needs to put another 20 pounds on, be around 280. But that's up to him. Far too early to tell what Tiramori's going to do in his career. He's only like 8 fights in. He's fighting absolute low-level competition, so nothing to go on there. Andy Cruz knocked out old mate in 5 rounds, the Japanese fighter. Not sure what's going to happen with him when, to be honest, he's not an Australian, so I don't really care. But I think Eddie said in the post-fight interview that he's going to have another show in August, so I'll be interested to see who is going to be on that in August. Possibly Jai Patara again, considering he only knocked out old mate in 5 rounds. And that's really about it. I think, George should retire. Call it a day. Just call it a day and be done with it, because, he should be extremely proud of his achievements. I've met him a couple of times. I've interviewed him for the channel for T Street Controversy. I don't think there's anything left for him to do. I don't think there's anything left for him to prove, and he should get out now while he's young, while he's healthy, wealthy, and wise. So that's it for my take on George's career. If he does retire, which I'm sure I hope he does, George, you've had a wonderful career, mate. You should be extremely proud of what you've done. You brought some massive fights to Australia. You got Lomachenko here. Well, you should be extremely proud of what you've done for yourself and, for yourself and the Australian boxing community. That win over Tier will go down as one of the biggest wins of all time. I probably think it's top 5 easy. Top 5 wins of all time. No one can ever take that away from you, mate. So if this is it, which I hope it is, congratulations. You've done well. Sit back, retire, enjoy that family of yours. And yeah, maybe he can get himself a commentary job with the DAZN or something. So, but that's it for this episode of Aussie Boxing Talk. As always, tackle a ball, wrestle a crook, harden yourselves the fuck up.